Well, through the years, my dad was driving down Parkview way back. Kurt was 5 years old at that time. We were living in an apartment. And my dad was driving down Parkview, and there was a house that said for sale. And it was a 90-foot, an old farmhouse, and then they had put in a basement, a concrete block basement, set the farmhouse on top of it. But it was 90 feet wide and 320 feet deep, and a big sign for sale. And so my dad said, well, you might be interested in that place. So by golly, we went over and we talked to him, and we bought it. Yeah. And then through the years, that was just 2 or 3 or 4 years, there was 2 lots alongside. Yeah. And then there was Crabapple Lane that came in on the side. And I checked into those 2 lots, and they were owned by women in Chicago. Okay. So I contacted them, and both of them wanted to sell.
Oh.
And so I said, golly, so then we had 80, 90, 180 by 320. Wow. But they took a little bit off when they straightened out the road. But it turned out to be a real good investment for us. And then Vi and I and the kids loved to watch Gunsmoke.
Yes, James Arness.
Oh my God! Every Thursday night we had Gunsmoke. Right. And then Vi became very interested in antiques. And Kurt had a shopping center up on Riverside and a vacant store.
Right.
He said, "Mom, if you want to start an antique store, go ahead."
Right.
So she started an antique store, and it ended up that she bought more older stuff that she sold. But then so our house began to get kind of crowded. And then I talked to Fred Johnson, a contractor, who was a good friend of ours, and we said, let's build a general store right alongside of our house. Long, probably 80 feet long by about 15 feet wide. Yeah. And we made that to a general store. So that was, then Vi would bring home the antiques, and we had some tape counters, with marble top and other things. And we hung things on the ceiling, and pretty soon we filled up the general store. And then Vi said, well, let's go down the back, about 15 feet wide and about 100 foot long. And 2 stories. The first was a saloon, and then a doctor's office above it, and then a clothing store, and then a print shop, and then a music store. And the different things fell in place. Right next to the Salvation Army, there was a printer, Bowling Carlson Printing, and they had come from Sweden in the 1800s.
Sure.
And I was going to the Army, and I looked in the window there, Bowling Carlson. Here was Mr. Bowling sitting in a chair by a desk, and they had a little sign in the window that says for sale. So I walked inside. I said, what's for sale? Everything. So I began talking to him, and I went home and talked. I said, what about the bank? Wouldn't they want to buy the building for parking or something?
Yeah.
No, they're not interested. Well, anyways, I made a deal with him, and I bought everything. Okay. And he had all the old printing equipment, from way back in the 1800s. Right. And then down the basement, he had furniture and he had lights and different things. So I bought the whole thing from him, and then we built that long building. So we had a print shop. We moved all the printing and stuff out there, and other things. And then later on, I made a deal with the Salvation Army. They wanted it for parking.
Sure.
And so we made a deal there. We tore it all down and put in parking. But that turned out, and then of course Vi was interested in musical instruments, and she began collecting musical instruments. And then I sold some property. I forget where it was. So then on the other side, Vi thought, well, let's build a hotel.
Oh my!
And a drugstore.
Sure.
And a lawyer's office, and then another little building. Anyways, this guy, Johnson.
Yeah.
He was out. He had about 4 carpenters, and they were out of work. And he said to me, Ed, if you want to build something like that, and I just showed him pictures with no architecture, no nothing. He said, listen, I'll just bill you what it cost me to pay the carpenters, and I'll buy the lumber, and I'll give you the bill. You just pay the lumber. And he built a beautiful building there, 2 stories, and no supervision, no nothing. I mean, so then we had the drugstore and the doctor's office, and not the lawyer's office upstairs. And then, of course, Vi had tours, and many people would go through and she just loved to give tours. And one day we had a tour of the police association, and they were upstairs in the lawyer's office, and he said something about, I've got the rope that killed, that hung the last man in Rockford.
Right.
He said, in a desk down at the police station, if you want it, I'll bring it out. So he brought that out, and we had pictures and cards.
Yeah.
And so we had some real valuable things, you know. And then, of course, through the years, and then finishing up the story, then here's the whole western town, and we put in a pool. We had a neighbor who did pools. We put in a pool.
Yeah.
And then I read this was in about 2011, and I read in a magazine that a tin type of Billy the Kid was going to be auctioned off in New Mexico, and they thought it might go for $500,000 because there's a lot of Western people looking in.
Sure.
Well, a fellow by the name of William Koch, K-O-C-H, bought it for $2.3 million. And then there was an old Western town in Colorado that was John Wayne and
Sure.
had shown pictures, had taken pictures there, movies, and it had been used as a little tourist place, you know. He bought the whole village for $4.3 million that same year.
Wow.
And he owned 15,000 acres in Colorado, in Gunnison, and he wanted to build his own Western town. And I read all that story about this Koch. And then I began thinking, you know, gee, boy, I should contact him because maybe he'd buy some of our antiques.
Yeah.
So I sat down. I had a picture of the drugstore with the tables and the old soda fountain, and I wrote a letter, and I said Mr. Koch, years and years ago, a man came to our Western town and in the drugstore, and we sat and had a sarsaparilla at the table, and he had a tin type of Billy the Kid, which I bought for $12. And I wrote the letter, and I got his address and mailed it. And I didn't hear anything for about 4 months. Finally, I get a call, and he said, well, I work for William Koch, and he got a kick out of your letter, and he'd like to have us come out and take a look at your antiques. And by golly, they came out, and they went through the whole town, and they bought practically all of our collection. And then they shipped it to Gunnison, and of course they've told me that I can come out there and see the village. I've never met Mr. Koch, but his people were very, very kind, and so we made some new relationships. So I was able to sell, and then of course about a year ago we sold a home, and so the home is gone now. But it's a wonderful young family that have it, so that's turned out good. So that's kind of the end of the.
That'll generate a lot of great memories for the Western towns.
Yeah, and I have many beautiful pictures of everything, and people ask to see them, you know.
Did James Arness ever come out to visit?
No, but I tell you, during that period of time, I wrote to Gunsmoke.
Yeah.
And the director, and I said something about, do you have any blueprints? Do you have any pictures or something of where you take your movies? He sent me the blueprints of a Western town. So I used some of those ideas in building our Western town. Now the director was very kind.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. Then we met Festus.
Oh, wow.
He was in Pecatonica and my wife and him, they had the greatest time talking, you know. So we had some good experiences. Yeah.